This is the SAU Report, a program featuring interviews with the faculty, staff, students, and alumni of Southern Arkansas University in Magnolia.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this edition of the SAU Report. I'm Kerry Bubien.
And I'm Stefan Roth.
Today we'll be talking with Jim Marvin, the advisor for the school newspaper, the Bray, and Heather Quent, the editor-in-chief. Thank you both for joining us this afternoon.
Pleasure.
You're welcome. Jim, how long have you been the advisor for the Bray?
This is early in the 5th year.
Are you enjoying it?
My hair was cold black when I came here, and 4+ years later, you can see it's turning a little gray around the edges.
And Heather, what is your experience working with newspapers?
In high school, throughout my entire high school career, I was in journalism. It was 2 class periods per day, and I was on the paper. So I have those 4 years. I have 2 years where I submitted to local newspapers in Maryland, and then when I came here, I started back. So probably about 8 years.
Jim, what is your background as a newspaper guy?
Oh gosh, I started when I was 14, working in as a printer in a little paper in West Texas, and then I went to college and worked for 3 papers while I was in college and edited the college newspaper. And then all in all, I've owned 18 newspapers and owned 6 of those. Whole bunch of years.
What is the big difference between working for a newspaper out there or working for a college newspaper?
Well, I don't think there's any similarities at all, Stefan. The stakes are entirely different, with college newspapers being paid primarily by the students rather than advertising. Why, they're not really the same. We had to produce in the professional world, or the newspaper fired you or closed. In college, why, it keeps on going, whether you make any money or not.
Jim, when you became advisor for the Bray, did you see any problems that were happening? And when you did get the job, was there anything that you were going to just go in and clean up?
Well, I think the year before I came, I think the Bray had published 1 or 2 issues.
The whole year?
In the whole year. There were quite a lot of problems with it at that time. I think that was one of the reasons I was hired, that I'd spent a lot of time as a professional newspaper person. I think that was one of the reasons. There were a whole bunch of problems. And so I think the first thing that I wanted to do, and actually Dr. Elizabeth Davis did it for me. She found the first editor, so there was an editor in place when I came. I came during the summer to interview and met Brenda Tuberville, who was to be the editor. She was a senior in journalism, and she had experience in editing newspapers and in journalism, professional and college, so she was a godsend. And then, of course, there was Michael Walters, who is probably the best feature soft news writer I've ever seen. He is a whiz as a writer, and those two made up the staff, and from there we just kind of spiked some people in and teaching them how to make pictures and do layout. They were all afraid of the time that it takes to put out a newspaper, and I told them that we could do a tab page in 8 minutes, and it ended up that we got it done like that. They were the 2 of them, and there were others too, but it was a real wonderful kickoff, because I think if I'd come in and had to try to recruit an editor not knowing anyone, including the university, it would have been extremely difficult. Brenda Tuberville and the English department really helped, because there was no print journalism program. I think we had 2 majors, maybe 3.
So is that the reason why there was only maybe 2 issues published that whole year, or was there other problems? Could you elaborate on that?
I don't know them, Kerry. I really, I've heard them, but I was not here, and it'd be difficult to say. You could certainly interview Dr. Gamble on that. There were some problems. I think that one of the people wanted to start a magazine off campus, and of course there's maybe not the personnel to run something like that.
Since the Braid tries to be real professional, Heather, what do you think is the big difference between having paginating, you start paginating on the Bray, and the difference between that and the laying, paste up the layout?
Well, when you do paste up layout, they're both really good ways to get a paper out. They both have their faults. Paste up for me was easier at first because I'd just done it for 6 years, and it's where you type something out, print it out, you lay it on the page, you make sure everything's straight, and you're pretty much done. Pagination is you have to learn from a desktop publisher. We're using PageMaker right now, and you have to learn all the things that you have to do with that. There's some good things because everything's perfect. Everything's sized right, everything gets laid down straight. There's never anything that's going to suddenly shift. But you still have to strip a lot of stuff in, which is you make a box and you don't put anything in there, and you just put it on when you take the box to the printer, and they do it for you when they shoot it. But I don't think I would prefer one over the other. I think they're both good in their own right. Pagination to me is just the way things are going, and all the professional newspapers use that unless something goes wrong and the computer crashes, and then they go back to the other way.
So you depend more on the computer right now then?
Yeah, you could always go back to the other method, even if, as long as you have one computer up that you can open the articles and print them out. You can do either way. So if the computer crashes, it's horrible and a tragedy, but you can still get the paper done.
And working with the computer, what role plays digital photography, Jim? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's playing more and more of a role. We had hoped to be completely digital this year, and thus far it's only, what have we had, 3 or 4 or 5 pictures, I suppose, in the paper. It seems as though there's something always wrong. We're kind of caught in the middle in that we have some of the equipment we need and some of the equipment we don't have. So since the Bray is considered by the administration and by me to be a laboratory for the print journalism department, we decided to go along with using negatives and scanning from negatives rather than going to a digital camera. That may have proven to be a mistake. The digital stuff is not working as well as I'd hoped, but still we're running it along with the Intro to Photography program. We have to use chemistry rather than digital in the starting stages of the photography program. So I don't know, I'm disappointed it's not farther along. I'll have to admit that I didn't think it would be. I'm really disappointed.
And the Bray readers, they saw not the first, but a full color front page this semester. And what are the chances to see this more often?
I think there are good chances to see it. The problems with color photography is that you have a little bit more of a lead time in doing it. But we print at the El Dorado News-Times, and they are very quick. They can do it quickly, not as quickly as some places, but we could get them a photograph probably by 5 o'clock on the day preceding publication, and they could probably get it scanned and put it together, and we could run color. We could run color every week. However, it's the cost. Running a picture of Turner probably cost extra $100. We have a great business manager in Lori Winchester who is starting to sell more ads, and so the paper on balance looks real well. The first year that I was here, I think we came up with from basically zero advertising money the year before to $13,000, and then the next year it went to $13,500. Last year it was down to about 12 or 11, and this year it should be well up over that. If we're making money, of course, why it's easier to convince the administration and ourselves to spend more money. although we control that budget, all we have to do is have them print it in color.
Heather, I know that when school began, as of this year, you were not the editor-in-chief. Could you tell me why the former editor resigned, and did you have to apply and go through all the steps just like she did? Could you elaborate on that?
Well, what happened was last spring, like every year, there's interviews, which the publication committee meets, and Jim meets with them, and we have interviews for editor. We bring a resume, things like that. We talk about our plans, and when we did that in spring, Doreen was chosen, and I was going to be news editor. So over the summer, I went to the university and did my classes and planned to do this. I went away on vacation. I came back, and Christine, the news editor, had talked to Mr. Marvin and found out that Doreen had had some health problems and had decided to resign. And Jim tried as hard as he could to keep her in school because it was almost so bad where she was going to have to leave school. So we had talked about it, and the way that we thought about it is the way it was ranked, you know, editor and then news editor, that the news editor should go. And we talked about it in a staff meeting, and the way it worked out was that I became editor. It's not probably the way I would have chosen, but, you know, things happen for reasons sometimes.
How long do you plan on staying at SAU, or when is your graduation time?
Sometime in the year 2010. No, actually, right now it's kind of hazy because I keep overloading myself, and I'm a double major now, a print and broadcast major, and I'm thinking about maybe doing a double minor. So I might be here for, at the very least, 2 years.
Or your plans to stay with the Bray, hopefully?
Oh yeah, there's no problem with that. As long as till they throw me out, basically.
In the October 23 issue of the Bray reports a fatal car accident that involved a student. Heather, how do you think a newspaper should report such an incident, and do you discuss the ethical problems with your staff members?
Yeah, we talk about that often. How we felt about this was when something like that happens, a tragedy, it is news. It happened to someone who attends SAU, and it affects us. So we really have to report it. I think the main thing with things of that nature, accidents, deaths, rapes, certain kinds of crimes, they need to be done with tact. And I think pretty much everything we do, we try to do with tact. And with tact comes the ethical questions, and we answer those things. And we try really hard to make sure that we're not going, since it is a touchy thing and it's something that, you know, someone's died, you have to be careful. But we try really hard to make sure that we're not going to hurt anyone that way, but we present the news. We do things like call coroners and things like that, where instead of going, I don't think we'd necessarily go right to a family member.
How do you handle pictures of?
Well, on the front page of this week's issue, we have a picture of the car after the demolished car. The main thing is just to make sure that the car's empty, and it's just a picture of the car.
Mr. Marvin, a few years ago, the Braid was banned from downtown Magnolia. Could you tell us a little bit about that? We
had a news editor, was the second year that I was here, that made a series of, in many people's eyes, unfortunate decisions on coverage. That person decided to have an issue totally dedicated to issues like masturbation, for example, the total coverage. And the Chamber of Commerce, after hearing a number of complaints, particularly from the banks, at that time we were taking the Bray around on Thursday afternoon and putting it in key locations downtown. They talked to the Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce called me and asked that the Brays not be put downtown anymore with whenever it was, and we had material like that. And that, of course, broke my heart. I'd never had anything like that happen before. Do you think it's time to bring the Bray back to Magnolia's banks and businesses? Yeah, it should be done there. It should. It's a nice publication, and it should go down there. The problem really is distribution. Like the papers are not there whenever this is being filmed, and so it's late, and we're wondering where they are. So by the time that we get the papers to us and then have students run them around town, why, it's late and the banks are closed. So then do we do it tomorrow? Then the paper's already a day old. Distribution is really a problem with the college paper. Even getting it to the dormitories, residence halls, is a problem.
Do you think the paper should be in downtown Magnolia?
I would like it, definitely would like it to be, but like as Jim said, every week's different. One week we'll get it at 3 o'clock, one week we get it at 6 o'clock, and it's not so much, even when we do get it, it's the problem of, some students have to go and eat dinner, and we're waiting, and it's not necessarily anything we can control. It's just the way things happen sometimes. I'd like them to be downtown, but it's a question of time.
On-campus survey last year, I think it was, showed that the Bray is the only source of information for many students. This in mind, do you think the Bray should include state or national news?
2 years ago, Cheryl Leggett had some sections of national and state news, and I think that it didn't end up going over as well as they thought it would. It was just a part that was more a filler in the end than an actual news bits. Plus, then you have to decide what's important, and then you have 8 things that happen this week, and you only have enough room for 2. You have to decide the magnitude, and then you end up offending people, or people think that this is the only thing that happened all week, and there's a lot to cover in 1 week. Plus, we also have things we'd have to probably get the AP wire service, which is very expensive, and we're not so much sure it would be a healthy investment because, once again, you still have to weed through everything. It takes time, and then you have to say this is more important than that, and you'll end up leaving stuff out that's important.
Jim, what makes a college newspaper a well-rounded paper that appeals to the faculty and students, in your opinion?
I'm not sure that's a correct question, Kerry. I'm not really interested in being an advisor to a newspaper, college newspaper that appeals to the administration or the faculty.
So you
or
more
the
so
staff.
focus on the
Right.
students?
I think that the student newspaper is just that, a student newspaper, and basically everything that is not directed to students about the student benefits or all the things that happen on a college campus or that are around students, I think it's wasted. The reason that we don't print, as Heather so eloquently said, national news, is that I don't believe that that's the role of newspapers right now. I think that broadcast has taken over much of the national news and even state news, and that newspapers thrive when they cover local news. And thus, I believe that college newspapers should cover what is important to students. Now, we have a teacher profile in the paper, and I seriously doubt if anybody reads that except the person who's being profiled. We could run surveys all day long and we would maybe find that that's not true, but I've found that when college newspapers cover anything outside of students, a number of things happen, and it's all bad. If you run a great, if we printed a great story about a member of the education department about how many books she had written and articles and things like that.
You'd lose.
Well, first of all, she would say, well, they didn't get it all. They didn't do it right. I wrote more than that. Her colleagues would also say, gosh, I've done more than she has. I don't know why they didn't feature me. So now we have the woman that we've written about mad at us, and we have her colleagues mad at us. And the other faculty members say, why in the heck are we writing things about education anyway when we should obviously be writing it about print journalism? So then the students don't read it either. Only the students that may know this woman would read it at all. So it's a lose-lose situation, in my opinion. Some people think that they'll get good grades if you're a print major and you run a great article on your beloved advisor. Why, this beloved advisor is going to give you good grades, but they haven't run one on me, so we can't prove that.
I'll write one for you. Hopefully that'll bring that.
If you put out the Bray in downtown Magnolia, do you think you should include county news or Arkansas news?
Certainly county. I think Arkansas news would really have to be focused to the town. There are other ways to get news about. The Banner News does a job, a getting better job of covering state news and certainly county news, certainly about the sheriff. And that we have other papers. The Democrat Gazette comes in strong with state and regional news.
How many students are currently enrolled at SAU in the journalism department?
In print journalism,
Print journalism.
we have 19 majors, I believe.
And the Bray, as a newspaper laboratory for these students, could you explain what role this publication plays for the progress of recruiting new students and for the old students?
I think for journalism students it's particularly important because as a former newspaper publisher, I've hired a lot of young people over the years. You know, straight out of college, my newspapers were smaller, so I did not get the well-known people that had experience. I got primarily college graduates. Fortunately, I got good college graduates. But I would never, ever talk to a person coming in applying for a job if they did not have an extensive clipbook. And of course, you guys have heard this, me preaching in the classes that you will not get a job without a clipbook unless your dad owns the newspaper, and then you'll get a job. So in that case, then, I want all of the journalism people, minors, majors, everyone that wants to, thinks about having a career in the media, in print media, to work for the Bray so they can get clips. It's the only place usually a college person can get clips. We're fortunate in one way to have the Magnolia newspaper is that many students can write things. I think Lance is a good example, getting pictures and things in the Banner News. But it's an absolute necessity if the print people are going to get jobs when they get out of school.
And what are the chances for SAU students to get a good job since we are a little
About 2 weeks ago now, I had 3 newspapers calling me at the same time, 4 people. I don't know why that is true. I do not know, because coming here from the West Coast, if you didn't have a master's degree from an extremely prestigious university, you're not going to start in anything but the smallest paper. That's not true. The News Times in El Dorado is calling me continually for people. They've put on at least one broadcast person over there that graduated from SAU. There's another broadcast person in Camden. They want people. When I graduated from college in '58 in an undergraduate role, I would have killed to get a job with a paper the size of Eldo. And not so now. I can't even place them. We've got several graduates bebopping around that could have a job right now. So the answer to your question, it's amazing. And I don't think it's particularly us. It's just that they want people. And newspapers want people that are really from here. If you own the El Dorado News Times, you don't want to hire somebody from Yonkers, New York, who's going to be here for 6 months or 18 months and then want to go back to the Northeast. We want people that grew up in Columbia County or Union County that plan to stay, that have family here, that have knowledge of the area.
I'm sorry. Heather, how many are on the Bray staff?
We have probably around somewhere between 15 and 20 right now. From everything from photographers, writers, to our advertising department. It's growing.
As far as I know, you don't work for free. No one works for free, but you put a lot of time and effort into your job. Is there a scholarship offered for the editor-in-chief?
Yes, there is. It's, I believe, a 1/4 scholarship?
Half.
A half scholarship.
Half scholarship.
Plus getting paid the student.
So you also get paid?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
And
she
same-
gets to associate with me too.
Yes,
so-
that's the
That's
whole
right,
thing
that
right
would be,
there.
that would be the greatest thing.
Do you think the Bray has reached a level where they could enter journalism award competitions, or do you plan for attending those competitions?
There's a lot where you can just take your paper from the semester, all your papers, and send them in. There's also ones you can do at conventions. Usually the convention ones are for specific people. They'll go in and they'll say, here's what happened, write about it, and you've got 15 minutes. As far as, I haven't gone to any in college, but that's how we did it in high school. There are a lot of them, and Jim probably knows more about that than I do.
There's a number of contests that we can enter and plan to. I think that the Bray is not yet up to attempting to win general excellence, but there are a number of articles and pictures and editorials and columns that will win divisions of it, and that's how you win big prizes, is have all the people win firsts and seconds and thirds. I think that we will enter the Arkansas Press Association collegiate competition this year.
Heather, every school newspaper, or even local newspapers, national newspapers, do have controversy, which cause a lot of commotion on campus or wherever they're published. What has been the biggest story that has caused that?
To be honest, we haven't even really gone out looking for controversial issues. They seem to be coming to us. I mean, we sit back and people come in and say, look what happened. Okay, we'll write about it.
Right.
We had major issue with the computers and the Social Security numbers being available for view of any student. And we did that. There was a lot of controversy on that. I know that Tracy Campbell, who wrote that story, I had a lot of people talking to him and got a few dirty looks here and there. But for the most part, that, or maybe the freedom of religion, having to deal with the international students and Marriott. With the controversial issues, like I said, we are not going out steam-headed looking for those things. We have a few things under reps, but we won't talk about that. But they come to us, and we call it as we see it, and a lot of times people don't like it, but that's what the letter to the editor is for.
Right. Jim or Heather, I guess this question goes to both of you. Have you had any complaints? Clean this up, or, I mean, do you get a lot of them?
We get complaints, sure. I don't think it'd be any fun if we didn't. We get complaints from all directions. We get complaints from each other. I complain to them, they complain to me. It's a business that you just don't suit everybody all the time.
Never.
But it seems like a good time to bring in that, maybe this is self-serving, but Dr. Gamble has never in my time here tried to censor the newspaper, and I think there's been a couple of comments that would make people think that, but he has not. There's been others, but not Dr. Gamble.
Yeah.
He's a big fan of SAU, though. He supports all of us. In your eyes, as far as, don't you think so, Stefan?
That's true.
In your eyes, what do you feel that, as far as your staff or the newspaper goes, what could y'all brush up on? Is there anything?
Probably working on deadline. That would probably be the thing I would have the most to talk about. It's a lot of, most of the print majors aren't taking 5 or 10 classes. They're 5 or 10 hours. They're taking 18 or 21 or things like that. They're all overloaded as it is, and they have extracurricular activities. So even though this is their job and this is what they want to do with their life, it's still hard to get it done. And accidents happen, discs get lost, articles don't pull up when you open them. I would like to see people work more on the deadline, because we could get the paper out quicker, and the less time we have to spend waiting, the more time we can just spend designing or looking at, we want this picture, we have more choice. When we are so close and it's 11:30 at night and we all have tests the next day, it's a lot more difficult to appreciate doing the job.
Okay. Jim or Heather, do you have any advice for our viewers as far as if they're thinking about joining the Bray staff?
Come on. Come on down.
Yeah, we need as many people as possible. We've hired 2 new employees who do not as of yet have journalism training. They're handling press releases right now and working with copy editors and the section editors to find out what they need to
Learning
do.
the ropes.
They're learning the ropes. They will be taking basic news writing shortly, though. So that's a really good thing that we're happy about, though. Anyone come down, talk to us?
Well, as we always say, it ain't brain surgery.
No, not at all.
You guys can do it.
I want to thank you all for joining us today. This has been the SAU Report. I'm Kerry
And
Bubien.
I'm Stefan Roth.
Good afternoon.
The SAU Report is a production of broadcast journalism students in the Department of Theater and Mass Communication at Southern Arkansas University in Magnolia.